Look who I've got today. I got Miss Cordelia came over to see me. How are you, sweetums?
Good girl.
Look
She's
at,
getting big.
oh my God. Oh, now I've got Rosie because she can't stand it. Oh my God. Oh my gosh, you guys, you're so funny. Poor Barley sitting down there.
My guys don't care.
All right, well, Kat, take it away for this chapter. What are we going to see? What's happening?
So we must continue the party, right? I mean, we've learned about the brothers, and they're out on the town, and they've met some lovely ladies that know how to fix stuff. But what happened? I mean, all of a sudden they went away. So we've got to find out a little bit more about their story, and that's what chapter 12 is all about.
Now, I got Barley, and Barley's going to listen to chapter 12 too.
Okay.
Chapter 12. Brandt was starting to panic. The king would have his hide if he let anything happen to his sons. He had 3 pair of guards stationed in strategic locations throughout the pub, but it wouldn't matter how carefully he had prepared if something happened to the brothers before they arrived. He had warned them about making the drive without security, but they had insisted on it. Now Brandt was biting his claws with worry and felt like he needed a drink. He sauntered over to the bar. "What'll it be?" asked the barman. Brandt hesitated. He could foresee what was coming and had to think about it. Oh hell, he thought. Who cares? "Give me a lemon frisbee with no ice," he said with a defeated sigh. The barman laughed out loud. "A lemon frisbee? For a big guy like you? I pictured you as a hammer-down sort of guy." Brandt drank hammer-down more than anything. The barman was spot on with his perception. Brandt was definitely a hammer-down sort of guy. In fact, he was a triple hammer-down sort of guy, and he needed 2 triples before he would even begin to crack a smile. Brandt lived with a perpetual grumpy face, except for when the effects of hammer-down kicked in. Then he was all smiles. He felt obligated to give an explanation to the barman about the frisbee, and finally one came to mind. "It's a satins thing," he grumped. Brandt was about as far removed from being a follower of the Book of Satins as anyone could be, but he knew that it was respected. If someone said they were changing a certain behavior for religious reasons, people generally left them alone and let them do whatever they were trying to do without any hassle or additional questions. "Yeah, it seems I did something I shouldn't have done, and now I have to lay off ales and spirits for a while. You know, to get back into the good graces. It's free day, and I just needed to get out," explained Brandt. "It smells to me like you're here to get a date," said the barman. Brandt had kept his promise to Gethric and bathed, but he had also made an appointment at the Groom Goat for a brushing earlier that afternoon. The groomer had offered a fragrance spray for an additional 50 croats. It seemed like a good bargain, so Brandt accepted. It was evident to everyone within a 25-foot radius that the attendant had been extra generous with the spray. "There you go," said the barman, winking and nodding to a table of 5 lovely, unescorted damsels who had just walked in and sat at a table across from the bar. "You better move fast." Brandt responded with a sly grin that gave the barman the impression that he was interested in them. He turned so he was facing in their direction, but it wasn't the girls he was watching. He was staring at the door. There was still no sign of Cedric and Gethric. The Shoe and Fiddle was one of the larger pubs in the city. It sat on a wedge where Carriage Street, at a very acute angle, converged into Ballywick Avenue. It was a triangular building with a prominent 4-story facade. The proprietor rarely advertised because the pub advertised itself. Anyone coming down Ballywick Avenue, heading toward the intersection, was forced to veer left, staying on Ballywick, or veer right, going on to Carriage Street. If they didn't, they would drive right into the front door of the Shoe and Fiddle. The pub radiated with warmth. The aged wood-paneled walls were laden with old photographs and paintings, which created an air of nostalgia. Stained glass fixtures dotted the copper plate ceiling. There was a stage along one side of a large dance floor, which was located in the center of the lower level. The dance floor was made from Valendale white oak, which was laid out in a herringbone pattern. The floor was surrounded by 2 levels of balconies. Tables lined the balconies so that visitors had a good view of the dance floor below. The centerpiece of the Shoe and Fiddle was undoubtedly the legendary bar, which Jacob, the head barman, kept in immaculate condition. It wrapped around the far end of the pub in a semicircle. It was made from Valendale red oak, which had a deep reddish-brown color and dramatic wood grain. The back of the bar had ornate, hand-carved columns supporting an equally ornate crown. The columns separated large mirrored sections. There were 5 tiers of glass shelves and hundreds of beers, ales, wines, and spirits from which to choose. Jacob and some of the other shorter barmen had to use a rolling ladder to reach the top 2 tiers where the most expensive libations were kept. The musicians at the Shoe and Fiddle were the best in the kingdom. There was a drummer, a guitarra player, a bass player, a fiddler, a keyboardist, and a piper. The sound cones on the stage were made using the most sophisticated resonators available. The music could easily be heard above the crowd. Brandt was attempting to enjoy the music, sipping his Fizzy, when Cedric and Gethric finally came in. He heaved a huge sigh of relief. He nodded to them after making eye contact, and they nodded back. He had questions, but those would have to wait. They were obviously okay. He would join their party soon enough, and he could ask a few questions then. The brothers stood in the doorway, scanning the room for their friends. They saw them and headed in that direction. As they passed by Brandt, the air suddenly thickened with the heavy scent of sandalwood and talcum. The strength of the fragrance stunned them both. Gethric took a deep breath, glanced sideways, and looked at the bear. Brandt made a slight, "Yes, it's me," expression, which sent Gethric and Cedric away laughing and fanning their noses. They made their way to their friends who were already assembled in a nook not far from the main door. They were greeted with enthusiastic cheers. The alcove was raised 2 steps higher than the main floor and surrounded by a half wall that would help keep them separated from the main crowd. It also gave them a better view of the entire main level. More importantly, it gave the guards a better opportunity to see them. Brandt felt it would be the safest place in the pub, so he had reserved the space in advance. Shortly after arriving, Gethric had made sure that everyone in their group knew that he and Cedric had a nom de guerre for the evening, and he urged them to be extra careful not to let their real names slip out. The ale was flowing freely, and the party was in full swing. Brandt had casually managed to infiltrate their group so he could be as close to the brothers as possible. None of their friends knew that Brandt was their chief bodyguard. Within a few minutes, he had managed to gather bits and pieces of what had transpired on Corkscrew Lane and stitched the story together as best he could. Within an hour, the pub had filled to capacity. Gethric could feel the energy pulsating in his bones. People were carefree, laughing, bantering, dancing, and drinking. He had experienced many banquets and festivals during the course of his 28 years, but none of them had ever come close to giving him the glorious sensation he was experiencing now. The patrons seemed carefree and appeared to be living life with abandon. Gethric knew this world would never be his life, and he was glad to know how it felt. He was so happy to be there. That is, until he realized he didn't want to be there. He wanted to find a way to move the party to the snail's trail to see if he and Cedric could possibly get better acquainted with Ginevra and Oris. The image of her in his rearview mirror as he drove away had consumed his thoughts for the past few hours. Cedric had made a similar comment about Oris and had mentioned that he wished there were some way to go find them. As frustrating as it was, Gethric had to accept the fact that the guards and his friends were already situated here, and he knew that it would be next to impossible to change venues. "Here's to the birthday, boy!" shouted David, one of the Mage Guild fellows. "Everyone, raise a glass." He looked around to make sure they had, and then bellowed, "To Cyril!" They downed their ales, emptied their glasses, and began singing a rousing round of "For He's a Jolly Good Fellow." Cedric was a little embarrassed about being the center of attention, but he thanked everyone for coming to the party. He gave a special thanks to Gethric for arranging it. The dance floor seemed like a trampoline bouncing to the beat of the music. Everyone applauded and cheered for the band when the song came to an end. The leader whistled and then shouted to the crowd, "May I have your attention, please?" It took a while for the wave of silence to reach those who were further away, but the room quieted and folks turned their attention to the stage. The drummer began playing a gentle but persistent boom, 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 boom on his thunder drum. "Ladies and gentlemen," the leader shouted, "we have a surprise for you." As soon as he said the word surprise, the room cheered and everyone immediately began reaching for their speaksies. The Shoe and Fiddle was known for impromptu publicity stunts. Those lucky enough to be in the pub when it happened would take pictos and cinnabits and start sending them to their friends. The news of the event would ripple throughout all of Alair in a matter of minutes. The leader paused again, purposefully teasing the crowd, and created an air of anticipation in the room. The boom, 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 boom continued. "Someone you know and love, someone you've heard right here on this stage before, is recording their first album with Carlet Records." The crowd cheered with excitement. The drumming got louder. Brandt leaned over to Gethric and said, "I hope it's Ringmaster. I saw him perform here a few weeks ago. He's great." The leader continued, "They are here to give us a late-night preview of one of the songs that will be on their new album. Are you ready?" The crowd roared with excitement, even though they didn't have a clue as to who was about to perform. The drummer doubled the thunder drums, and the thickness of the beat intensified. "Let's give a huge Shoe and Fiddle welcome to Ice Angels." The band started a cyclical progression of chords over the top of the thunder drums. The crowd started pumping their fists into the air and bobbing their heads to the beat. "I don't know Ice Angels," Brandt shouted to both Cedric and Gethric, "but I like the name. I guess they're new." A guitar solo began to sail above the other instruments as 3 performers appeared on stage. Their entrance had been choreographed in such a way that, as they entered, they would freeze in different positions every 8 beats. The lighting was set so that they appeared as silhouettes. The intent was to deliberately excite and mystify the crowd as they made their way on stage. The intro escalated into a frenzy until all at once the music stopped, the musicians froze, and the room went dark. What remained were 3 blazing spotlights shining down onto a trio of females, posed like marble statues, with a pillar of smoke shooting up from behind each of them. The crowd cheered wildly and pointed their speaksies at the stage, trying to capture as much as possible. The pause ended, and the band resumed playing the same vigorous driving beat, and the trio began to sing. "I don't know you, and you don't know me, but baby, baby, my soul can see. You've put a magic spell on me. Now I'm yours for all eternity, and I like it. I like it." The dance floor began to flood with patrons who were filtering in from the sides and coming down from the balconies. The crowd was clamoring to get closer to the stage. "Cedric, look, it's them," shouted Gethric. Cedric was watching and immediately knew who them was. "You've got to be kidding me. Really?" he replied. "We've got to get closer." Gethric turned to Brandt and shouted right in his ear, "It's them!" "Who?" asked Brandt. "The mechanics, the sisters who fixed the motor-bee." Gethric turned to Cedric, but his brother had already bolted into the crowd. "Wait!" shouted Gethric. Gethric ran after him. Brandt immediately realized that this situation could turn dangerous very quickly. He glanced around to the other guards. They had been alert, and all 6 of them were trying to move into the crowd in order to get closer to the brothers. The dance floor was like a teeming swarm of bees, and the brothers were soon lost in the crowd.
Party!
So-
Woo! Like rock and roll and big time music and everything with lights and action and sound cones instead of speakers. Yeah, all that kind of stuff.
Our love of music now gets to have a little fun in this book, which is fun for me, of course.
So
the song is fantastic.
I'll tell you.
Wait till you hear.
Yeah, so when we do this Lizzy Albright music recording, obviously the song I Like It is going to be just it's going to be high energy and great stuff. Just to let everybody be reminded, a lot of this is Kat and I collaborating on a story. I'm writing a bit now and trying to figure things out, but I get stuck, and so Kat and I have to talk. So I remember even saying to Kat, how do we get these girls to the pub? How do we make that happen? What are they, because they're over at the Snails Trail, and Kat said, well, let's have open mic or something, and they show up to do a what do you call it, a karaoke or something like that.
Something with the entertainment.
Or it was going to be like, it was actually in my brain whenever you said it, it was like a small little pub with a little corner place where they could sit there and strum a guitar or sing something. They were going to be noticeable. The guys were going to obviously see them again and be noticeable. And it was me that turned it into a Lady Gaga concert, right?
Yeah, totally.
I wanted them to go from not just they kind of sing, but they're just like, oh my goodness, and this is like their big moment. So that's what it's just. I don't know. It's just the fun. It's the fun part of writing that I wasn't expecting. We know what the synopsis is, but how it begins to roll out and how it changes from a little pub ditty to a magnificent concert and in a place where these things are kind of premiered. It's just fun how that evolves for me. And so, I mean, and from here really to the end of the book has been like that, where it just keeps unfolding and we know where we're headed, but it's still to get there. I mean, even where we are in the book right now, I know where we wanted to go. You know where we wanted to go, but getting there requires all of this extra stuff, which makes it warm and rich and wonderful. So I hope everybody's loving, getting to know this set of characters.